From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast. This is episode 534. I'm Andrew in our forum, Andrew NLSC on X. With me as always, my co-host Derek, DV3 in our forum, and DV3G and DV384 on X. Derek, we're here once again to talk about two of our favourite things, basketball and basketball video games. So as always, I'll throw it over to you to let our listeners know what's on tap this week.
So our main topic this week, Andrew, is actually a community question. So I asked basketball gamers, for both young and old fans, classic hoops remains to be a big draw. In fact, we have seen increased interest this year. What is the draw for you? Why are you so into the retro content, mods, or otherwise? And before we get to the community's responses, Andrew, we need to talk about what draws us in, and also the NBA 2K10 session that we just had using the amazing 96-97 roster mod created by Stomp the Court and team. We used the Bulls versus the CPU Jazz, and it was a blast.
Nothing takes me back to the 90s like seeing No Fear, the clothing brand there. Yeah, such an authentic mod. The faces, superb. The rosters, you can tell the attention to detail has been put into the rosters with tendencies and the player ratings. Everything has just had so much attention to detail. And yeah, it just really took me back to 1997. Such an authentic mod. A lot of fun, and we had some great highlights in that game.
So the Jordan and Pippen cyberfaces, and even the Rodman cyberface, we talked about it, and those are better in NBA 2K10 in that mod than they are in NBA 2K24 by
Easily.
default. And I would say easily, exactly. And I just want to remind people that mods were excellent going back decades ago. And, Andrew's talked about his modding on NBA Live 96. Andrew and I dabbled in mods on mid-90s live games together as well, including doing portraits and whatnot. Great mods and great retro mods have been around for decades. But these big roster mods, Andrew, the ones where they are complete conversions, those to me will always be the gold standard. And when they're done well like this, where it's the full NBA on NBC presentation, where the Dorners are accurate, the jerseys are accurate, the accessories are appropriately assigned to the players, the pace on the floor is what it should be for that given season, etc. That type of work just absolutely blows me away. And I think that those are the mods that people can get the most immersed in. And, one of the main questions for this week's show was what draws us to using, retro mods and whatnot, or playing with retro seasons in general, even if it was with something like My NBA Eras. And really what it is for me, one of the biggest reasons is taking me back to a time when I enjoyed the NBA more drawn to the players, more drawn to the teams, the personalities. When I thought the league was in better shape and basketball was in better shape in general, from youth hoops all the way up to the NBA. And in the mid-90s, I was absolutely loving the product. I love the NBA on NBC presentation, the drama surrounding each game. Even if it was just a regular season game, it felt like there was a lot of drama, a lot of excitement about that game. And I enjoyed so many of the players, the stars, the role players, the bench warmers. I just thought there were so many interesting teams. The art around the league, we've talked about this before, amazing courts, jerseys, etc. I just think the NBA was in a great place. So one of the reasons why, I had so much fun when we just played that NBA 2K10 mod, and why I have so much fun working on the NBA 2K19 Classic Seasons mods, and why I enjoy the NBA 2K14 UBR and URB, and the 2K13 URB, and the 2K17 Classic mods that I made with my brother. It's because it brings me back to a time when I really, really loved everything that was going on in the NBA.
Oh, for sure. It's the same for me. And before I get into that, to go back to what you said about the accessories in the mod, that authenticity, that attention to detail, as I said, it's just like when you fire up a game and see the default content and you see that the developers have gone to the trouble of actually adding that attention to detail. because that mod still would have been a blast, even if there were some accessories wrong. I know for some people it's a major nitpick, but say if Luke Longley didn't have his knee sleeve, you might notice, but it's not going to ruin the on-court experience, the fun you're having on the sticks, really. But the fact they've gone to the trouble for every single player to resemble the 97 season, it just makes it so more special. And I agree. It's why I've been drawn more to playing with older teams, classic teams, in newer games. And of course, mods like this are fantastic as well, and I absolutely support them. I've made a couple of them myself over the years. 96 mods for 2001 and 2004. Yes, my nostalgia was starting very early, even within a decade of that season. Half a decade in the case of Live 2001. And the other thing, of course, is that you can play with those updated mechanics and those updated graphics of a game you really enjoy. Look, I love 96 PC, Derek. It is one of my all-time favorite basketball video games. However, it is kind of primitive. It doesn't have a dynasty mode, a multi-season franchise mode. It doesn't have faces. It doesn't have a steal button for reasons I've talked about before, technical reasons, because it's a DOS release and DOS only supported a limited amount of buttons on the old game port of PCs back in the day. That changed with Windows, obviously. And I'll actually have a Way Back Wednesday talking about that in more detail. But they made some advances, obviously, by 2001 and by Live 2004 and 2K10, that you can take advantage of all of those technical advances, yet also indulge that nostalgia for an NBA you love. It's a great combination.
Yeah, in NBA Live 96, you're not crossing over with Michael Jordan, going into a spin move, and then throwing it down on somebody. Right, like those mechanics aren't in NBA Live 96. So exactly, you get those updated mechanics and the updated graphics, and it really looks like Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman and Ron Harper out there. And Ron Harper was huge for us in that game, like you said. It was kind of a throwback game.
Hollywood
for Harp. Yeah, he had a couple threes in there. He threw it down once, and he was getting to the rack, making good passes. So that was really good. There was a comment that I completely agree with that somebody made in the community based on this community question. They stated that one of the reasons why they love playing with classic mods like the one we were playing, or the URB or UBR, etc., is because the community does a much better job than 2K representing those players, those teams, and those seasons. And I couldn't agree more. I think that the community pays special attention to the art. They make the art look better. They make the cyber faces look better for the players. They assign the appropriate accessories when 2K does not do that. They fix the tendencies and attributes and the signatures, so it makes it play like the real life counterpart. They edit the team tendencies and whatnot, so they play more like the team in real life. Like, the community absolutely rocks when it comes to accuracy, especially those who take on these full retro single seasons, right? A lot of attention to detail there that 2K misses or rushes because it's low priority for them. So yeah, I mean, that's a draw, I think, for a lot of the basketball video game community and people who love basketball in general.
And you know how long it takes to make mods like that. You made the Ultimate Classic Teams roster for 2K17, you and your brothers, and just hundreds, indeed thousands of hours go into the tendencies.
Thousands.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The ratings, the tendencies, all of the accessories, obviously, sourcing the faces, creating the faces, the portraits. It's just a really long job to make a detailed mod. And look, you can make mods that I think are 90 to 95% complete. I'm a big advocate of minimalist modding, as you know, Derek, but I'm also an advocate of, look, if you have 95% of the faces and the only faces that are missing are deep bench players, and you have either default faces to work with or some generic placeholders that you can put in until version 1.1 or 2 or whatever, however you want to do your version numbers for mods, then that is okay if it's very close to completion, if everything else is done. Especially with retro modding, and I wrote about reviving retro modding in last week's Monday tip-off, that as we try to make some big projects for older games, they are starting to happen, Derek, and I love to see it, but it is important to keep in mind that it is okay to have a work-in-progress release at this stage of the game. If you're talking about modding a 10-year-old game, then yeah, you can certainly make some allowances and build that project over time. And if you get something out there, then oftentimes people will jump in because they know that if they contribute to this project, it's not going to go to waste because the project is already out there. With that being said, when the game is new, we do like to have those detailed mods, and there have been so many over the years. This 97 mod, once again, so fantastic. And yeah, once again, I also have to really push for that behind-the-back Michael Jordan pass you made to be in the top 10. Look out for that one, people.
Yeah, so in relation to releasing a work-in-progress mod, even if it's just 2 teams, right? So let's say you put together 2 teams from a single season and you make the art appropriate. Most players have correct cyber faces and accessories, and the players play like their real-life counterparts. That's enough of a demo to get people on board to help you with your mod.
Oh, sure.
If they like using those 2 teams and they think it looks great and they want to see more, meaning they want to see maybe all 30 teams or how many were ever in the NBA at that time, then you will definitely get people to jump on board. Even for older games, we saw collaboration for mid-2000s NBA Lives recently, right? Working on jerseys together, working on courts, upgrading things for that. We see collaboration for 2K14 still and 2K11, and we see a lot of collaboration for 2K14 right now on the NLSC Discord with things like the WNBA mod and a 4 and 5 point mod, etc. So a work in progress mod can just get more people on board. So don't think that it has to be complete before releasing it. About that Jordan pass to Pippen, if you remember correctly, in real life, Jordan also had a very similar behind the back pass in the exact same spot that shows up on highlight reels.
I was thinking
pretty
that.
Consistently.
Yeah.
And this was very similar. So yeah, this has to be in the top 10. And I told you after that game of 2K10, some of those animations are just so damn smooth in that game. When I stole it with Jordan and I threw it up court to Tony Kukoc and he threw down a 2-handed jam, that entire sequence was perfect. Great foot planning, great reaction with the dribble, great reaction with the slam. It just looked awesome. And I think that NBA 2K10 is so overshadowed by NBA 2K11 that rarely anybody discusses it today. But you and I both know how fun that game is and how good that game looks. And I also absolutely love the press book at the end. I think we had 56 images from the game. And I don't know how they choose those images, but they choose a lot of great ones. And they try to capture everybody on the floor. Like in the press book, there was Luke Longley posting up. There was Ron Harper driving to the hoop. There was Jordan pulling up for a jump shot. There's another one of Jordan dunking. There was Scottie Pippen getting a steal. Like, they do such a good job with those stills. And that is a feature that never should have left basketball video games, because it is a great way to get thumbnails for social media, right? Be a great way to get thumbnails for YouTube or for an IG post, etc. But it's also just a great look at the action. So I would love to see the press book come back.
Me too. I said as much when I covered it for Way Back Wednesday, probably going back a few years now. And just very quickly, one more note about the work-in-progress roster mods. With faces, that 97 mod, that has authentic faces for the 97 season for players who are in the game by default. Like in Allen Iverson, it rolls him back to his rookie look for the 97 season. And once again, you can release a version 1.0 that doesn't have all of that detail. You can just focus on missing faces first. In fact, that is what I would recommend for any of those mods, to focus on what's missing rather than what you can update, like a face that is already in the game that you can reuse as is. But again, just tremendous attention to detail. The fact that Stop the Court and crew went to that trouble is absolutely amazing. And yes, 2K10 is an overlooked gem, as you said in our chat. And it's a game that I had to warm up to, like a lot of 2Ks from that era. It doesn't have the right stick dribbling, so I had to really warm up to the controls. I'm still mastering them. I'm not as fluent with those controls as some other early 2K games that I've been playing a little bit more recently. But it is an overlooked game. Like you said, 2K11 really does overshadow it. And to your point about animations, they are fantastic. Some of them definitely do look better than today's animations, quite a few of them in fact. But how cool was it that MJ's authentic animations were in the game when MJ wasn't by default?
It reminds me of NBA Jam on Fire Edition with the Michael Jordan stuff that
Yeah.
was hidden in the game that John Z1 was able to unlock. Yeah, I mean, his adjusted layups at the hoop, his jump man signature dunk, his leaning slams. You really feel like you're using Jordan out there. They even have a great signature shot in the game that looks just like Jordan's jump shot. And you hit a shot with MJ on the second possession of the game where it was like a short baseline pull up on the left side of the court, and that looked unbelievably like MJ. I also want to point out about NBA 2K10 that they have a camera view there called Showtime, and I switched it to broadcast, but there's a Showtime camera view in there. And first off, I love the name Showtime for anything.
Of course.
So I think that's really fitting, and it makes you want to use the camera view more. But it's a very unique view, in my opinion, of the action, and it really takes you onto the court, but keeps you in a broadcast angle. And I love to see that camera view come back as well.
So many things in old games that we'd love to see come back. And you mentioned the press book, obviously, and I'll circle back to that. There might be some people who say, oh, that it's not relevant anymore, especially as a lot of people are gravitating towards the online modes. I think it would actually be even more relevant for online play because you can't pause an online game and take screenshots from angles, photographic angles, that you can do in offline play, obviously. So I think it would actually be even more relevant today for content creators, just people who want to keep mementos of their great sessions, to have that press book and be able to save those screenshots from different angles that you can't do in online play. I think content creators would really make use of it. And of course, in the NBA side of things, it is another great detail. That's the other thing about old games and why I like going back to them, and whether I'm playing with default rosters or retro mods, going back in two ways, if you will, that it's cliche, Derek, and it's cheesy and corny and everything else. But those games back in the day, and even through to the early to mid-2010s, I would say they had heart, they had soul, they had character that's just not there in today's games that feel very disposable. Obviously, they always wanted us to buy the new game every year and to move on, and a lot of us did, as the games did get better and better pretty much every year at the height of the NBA Live series, at the height of the NBA 2K series as well. But those games that were striving for authenticity and putting in all those little details, as we said, they were just so special, and that's missing today, and I don't feel that connection with modern games. And I don't think it's just being a jaded old head, Derek. You can see the attention to detail in those games and those great features like the press book and the great animations and how the gameplay just feels so authentic, so fun on the virtual hardwood, that there's a reason that I'm sticking with old games these days. Not just that I don't like 2K24, and 2K20 is the last game that I really kind of got into, but you go back years, Derek, and you find these games with heart, with soul, with character.
You can feel the love when you play NBA 2K10.
Yeah.
You can feel the love, and you can see the love that they put into it. It's, it's the menus, it's the music, it's the commentary, it's the crowd interaction on the floor, like the arena sounds. It's the press book, it's the G moments, it's the highlight reels, it's the way they do the instant replay cuts during the game. It's all the different camera view options. It screams NBA action, right? For the time. And when you have a great video game that they put love into, you want to mod that game more. And those retro mods in those games that had a lot of love put into them, those are always going to look and play better in those titles, right? So NBA 2K10, there's a 91, 92, 96, 97, and 0203 mod for that game. All three of those mods rock, Andrew. All of them look awesome. All of them look unique and season specific, and all of them play well on NBA 2K10. And that's the way I feel about NBA 2K13 and NBA 2K14 as well, with the URB and UBR mods. Those games have great gameplay, Andrew, right? The developers put so much love into those games that those single season roster mods, and even the special roster mods that come with them, like the USA basketball mods, the college ones, etc., they absolutely rock. They all play well. They look awesome. And that's why those games are still being modded so much today, and so many new projects are even started for those games. And I think that the games have become more disposable now. I think that the focus is less on making a great basketball video game and more on how much money can we get out of each consumer. I think that you don't feel the love anymore
It's a product.
in the newest NBA 2K games. So yeah, I totally agree. I also want to point out that we are not the only ones who are really enjoying retro content. You and I had a conversation off air, and it seems like over the last year or so, there has been a much bigger interest in classic seasons, in older video games, in mods in general that bring back some of the seasons from the past, and players and teams and whatnot of the past, etc. And I think it's great. And one of the reasons why I think it's great is because over the last year or so, much of the media has been trying to tear down the past, right? But it's not working. It's actually getting people more interested, in my opinion, and they want to use these teams and they want to use these players. And what the media is trying to do, and people like JJ Redick, et cetera, I don't think it's working.
No, it isn't, because people who know their stuff are providing counterpoints, counter-arguments that are very persuasive because they are coming with evidence. And that hit piece that came out over the past week about MJ's Defensive Player of the Year, we don't need to get into that, except to say that it was absolute garbage. The usual suspects involved with that, Nick Wrong and Tom Hackestro, the latter of which once sent his goons after me on Twitter, X, That was just cowardly. I don't rate that behavior at all when you have a following sending it after people when they do disagree with you politely. I think it's abhorrent behavior. And when you look at the bullying that goes on with social media to send a big following after somebody who can't fight back because they have that smaller following, I just think that's rotten. He's a coward and a shill. And I don't rate that article at all. But it is a great example of how they are trying to tear down the past and people are fighting back. And I do love to see that. And when it comes to mods and games that aren't set in that season, the retro mods for classic games, it is the best of both worlds. You have that great game that you love, you have that season that you are nostalgic for, that great season. And what I said about those games, Derek, heart, soul, and character, I would say that about the NBA seasons that we are nostalgic for and the ones that people are remaking most often in games. I say most often because we do have some huge multi-season projects that just span decades of the NBA, Thundershacks rosters, and of course the Classic Seasons project for NBA 2K19 that you're contributing to, headed up by Stildo33. But it represents a time where people truly could say, I love this game, the old slogan of the NBA, of course. And there was heart, there was character, there was soul to those seasons. It's why we love to revisit them through highlights or on the virtual hardwood. But yeah, it's the best of both worlds when you can combine that with either retro gaming or mods to fill in for complete seasons.
So first off, people are already disproving what Hackerstraw wrote in that article. And yes, he's a hack. People have been showing footage of MJ during his Defensive Player of the Year season where he was a complete menace on defense, including games where he had 5+ steals in a given half, multiple blocks, etc. Second, Nick Wright admitting that he led this project where the entire goal was to discredit Jordan's Defensive Player of the Year season. This is what the media is today in 2024. It's incredibly sad. Third, trying to form a stat argument against Jordan's Defensive Player of the Year season is beyond stupid. Here's part of the reason why. So over the last few years, people have been showing footage of Luka Doncic, LeBron James, Trae Young, and others getting credited for assists where they absolutely should not have been. For example, somebody showed footage where LeBron was credited for 12 assists, and 6 of those assists shouldn't have been counted. He passed the ball to the receiver, who went into a one-on-one move and scored. When the receiver received the ball, he was completely stationary, guarded by his defender, did a couple jab steps on a couple occasions, and then went into his move, and LeBron was credited the assist. The pass did not lead directly to the score. If they had counted assists like that back when Jordan played, maybe Jordan would have had 1,000 assists in a single season instead of 650, which was his best. Lastly, you notice one thing these media hacks never talk about: the player's actual skill, the player's technique, and as a result, the impact they had on being a winner and winning games. Funny they don't talk about that. The stuff Hackerstraw Wright, Bayless, Stephen A., etc. put out is often simplified word vomit in order to appease the masses and create conversation. Seldom does it have any substance. It's garbage. And the problem with social media today is the BS spreads fast, and millions of people are given bad information as a result. Oftentimes, people run with that bad information, and it happens for three reasons. One, they think, why would this expert lie? Two, the ridiculous talking point fits their narrative. And three, people are often lazy and do not want to do research. They just want to be loosely part of the conversation, and this type of BS allows them to be.
I see that Scottie Pippen has jumped on the stats were padded and saying that he should have had the steals instead of MJ. So he's flip-flopped again, but that's Pippen retirement for you.
Right. And over the last 5 years, he's been a media nut anyway.
Yeah.
Right. And he's been flip-flopping constantly and contradicting himself constantly, whether it was in his book, whether it was on social media, etc. So you can't buy in to what a lot of former players say. We've talked about Gilbert Arenas before, who has just been constantly lying about his playing days, about players who came before him, etc. And people on his show, people like Al Harrington and whatnot, same thing. So it's hard to know who to believe, but if these athletes and former athletes are in front of your face, there is a good chance that they could lie, right?
Yeah.
And they, in order to drum up some drama, in order to sell a book, in order to get their name out there, in order to get, more media exposure. So yeah, it's hard to know what to believe, but this is not good for anybody. This article, this stuff that happens is really bad for basketball.
It really is. It really is. And it's funny how, well, I was going to say how MJ doesn't say anything about this stuff. I guess people say The Last Dance was kind of a rebuttal to it, but that's also in itself a conjecture from these people who already have that agenda anyway, or fans who dislike MJ and want to tear down his career, as the case may be. So yeah, it's just really ruined the discourse, and it used to be fun to talk about basketball.
The NBA season is over, and now they need to drum up some drama to keep people talking about basketball. And this is one of the things they do, right? Go back multiple seasons, and you'll see that after the NBA season ends, like stories like this and BS like this is started in order to keep people talking, right?
Yeah.
And to keep people debating and to keep the quote unquote fake GOAT debate alive. The one that was drummed up by the media that doesn't allow more than two people in it, et cetera. Like, it's just all BS, and this always happens after the end of an NBA season. So, use your brain, do your own research with, watching video, looking at highlights, evaluating players, et cetera, and don't listen to media mouthpieces like JJ Redick and Nick Wright and, people like Tom Haberstroh, who's always had agenda-driven behavior. And in relation to your point about, more love being in the NBA at the time, like real life NBA, like more passion, more personalities on the court that, we could be drawn to, et cetera. Go back and watch, because those full games are on YouTube. Watch the 2005 NBA Finals between the Spurs and the Pistons. And I want you to watch the quality of basketball, the intensity, the inside-out game, and oftentimes, depending who's on the floor, the outside-in game, the physical nature of that series. Look at the personalities on the floor, how much passion the players played with. Watch that series, and then watch some games from this year's NBA Finals. It makes this year's NBA Finals look like an absolute joke. From a talent perspective, in my opinion, from an intensity perspective, it's especially on the defensive end, and from a variety perspective. And also the presentation in 2005 was 10 times better than what we had here in 2024. So, yeah, I think one of the draws is the fact that the NBA was putting out a much better product. And I think that the superstars, there were more of them. I think there were more stars in the league in general. I think the leagues were less watered down from a talent perspective than what they are today. And like I said, there was more variety in the game that you could be drawn to. So, and we talked about it before, NBA on NBC back in the 90s and early 2000s absolutely rocked. And the people that they had behind the mic, whether it be in the studio at halftime or post game or pre-game, or, people for courtside reporting, or, people that were doing the color commentary or the base commentary, they were all better, in my opinion, than what we're getting today. So yeah, the love was there in real life hoops, and that's part of the draw.
I think Doris Burke and JJ Redick during the finals on the call with Mike Breen were about as excited for the finals as you were. But the thing is, they're being paid to talk about it, so they could have at least tried to fake some enthusiasm where you're being authentic, obviously. And we say that with your Celtics, your favorite team, your all-time favorite team, winning their 18th championship, obviously. But yeah, they were certainly not excited during the finals. And look, to their credit, it wasn't the most exciting finals. So I guess I can kind of give them a slight pass. But again, you are being paid to supposedly hype up the current game, but maybe they weren't the teams that people wanted to hype. Just putting that out there. And you are right about the agendas, obviously, and making up stories, fabricating stories during the off-season when there's nothing else to talk about except the upcoming draft and free agency, of course. And that love of the game is why people go back to those old seasons, because those old seasons, they predate this modern nonsense, this modern nonsense where you do have that fabricated debate and these hot takes, this hot take culture, and it was about appreciating everyone. Certainly we ranked and rated and debated who we thought was the best in the league and the best of all time. Those debates have been around, understandably, for decades, but it wasn't toxic like it is now. It wasn't so agenda-driven. You didn't have these pundits really putting down the past or putting down specific players. That's something that has really developed over the last 20 years or so, and it's really ramped up since 2016 for obvious reasons. But yeah, you go back to those years in the NBA before all that nonsense, before stupid stuff like the in-season tournament. Did you see the tweet, Derek, that, or the post, I guess, on X, that said, both of the NBA's most storied franchises got trophies this year, and they showed the in-season cup, the NBA Cup, and the Larry O'Brien Trophy with the Lakers and Celtics. One of those
But that's all by design. Yeah, no, one of those are
matters.
not like the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to point out, though, that there's a purpose for that. Why else would they post that? The whole thing is to get that reaction and to get people talking and
ridiculous,
to get people debating. And the whole reason why this, totally. The whole reason why this exists today, where there's this, obviously the fake GOAT debate was perpetuated by the media, but there's the whole reason why there's these comparisons and why there's crapping on the past, why all of this stuff. The majority of this is caused by the media and major social media influencers, right? They're the ones who are putting most of these ideas in people's heads and making people kind of, choose a side, right? And it's really old. I've said this before on another NLSC podcast. None of this existed, to be honest with you, growing up for me. And, I played for the high school basketball team. I had a bunch of basketball friends. I've had basketball friends my entire adult life as well. And we never did this crapping on the past thing. In order, even if we had a favorite player today, we wouldn't say that, Julius Erving was a plumber or garbage compared to our favorite player.
We respect the greats, yeah.
And my friends never did that either. Right? Like, I never remember somebody saying something along the lines of, well, Chris Webber would wash the floor with Bill Russell. Chris Webber's way more skilled than Bill Russell, right? Like, we never had that discussion where it was like, yeah, Shaq would eat Wilt Chamberlain alive, and Wilt Chamberlain played against worse competition, and he's a plumber, or like he played against plumbers. Like, we never. That never existed with me or any of my basketball friends. And I want to point out that the only time I started noticing this happening was in probably the mid 2010s, maybe early 2010s. But when that started happening, it was because of shows with Skip Bayless on it, right? And Stephen A. Smith and these stupid debate shows and all of that. It was the media that was pushing this so hard. And a lot of it was to do whatever they possibly could to promote today's product, right? And their way of promoting today's product was getting on these debate shows and these other sports shows, quote unquote sports shows, basically stating that today's athletes are better. Today's skill level is better. And everything before today's NBA was inferior. And of course, a large portion of a basketball fan base, they have social media, they have TVs, they're watching these people on TV, and then that gets them talking about it, right? And so, like I said, the biggest reason why this stuff is even existing is because of the media and major social media influencers. And a big portion of it is to kind of pump up today's product. I also want to point out, though, that they make themselves look really bad here, because it's very obvious that they're covering, in my opinion, for shortcomings of today's product.
Yes.
Right? That's like one of the biggest things
Very
that nobody
deliberate.
talks about. It's very deliberate. And the whole goal is to be like, everything is better today. And it's BS.
And the funny thing is that even when comparing players today, the discourse is very toxic. A player has a rough game, because even the best players do have an off night, and you've got so many posts about, are they actually not as good as people say? One bad game out of 82 in the regular season, and maybe up to 28 maximum in the playoffs as well. So just some of the discourse around even comparing modern players to each other, that everything has to be at the expense of somebody else. Somebody's success has to be at the expense of someone else. And obviously, it is a competition, so somebody must win and somebody must lose. But the idea that one player had a great game and another player didn't have such a great game, that latter player is actually terrible and just trash. And like, no, they've made it to the NBA, and their numbers on the season are fantastic. They're clearly a star talent. It's just so hot take driven. What will get engagement? It's not about educating people about basketball. It's not about celebrating the game, analyzing it in any kind of meaningful way. It's just about throwing out those takes, as you said, for engagement. And that does feel very shallow. And of course, we see the same critique about video games as well. So there's a reason we're going back and enjoying what felt like a more heartfelt NBA and video games.
Yeah, it's also gotten to a point where if you try to critique today's basketball product, whether it be AAU hoops, high school hoops, college hoops, the NBA itself, the state of basketball, where if you try to criticize the play style, etc., that you'll get people sent after you on social media, like you stated, like Tom Haberstar and his goons and whatnot. You will be attacked, you will be insulted, you will be given the same terminology by pretty much everybody, basically saying that basketball is the only sport that people won't admit has gotten better and improved and all of this stuff, and which, by the way, is a lie. That's another complete lie. Right
now it's the only sport where people actually dub on the past. Other sports actually respect their heritage. Somebody posted in our Discord recently, I think it might have been Maz, posted the clip of 1954 presentation for a baseball game in the modern day and said how cool would it be if they did that for the NBA. And they're not going to do it because that would be to celebrate the past.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, the same thing with like football, right? Like I'm not as involved in that community, but I don't see the constant badgering of the past. I see praising of guys like Barry Sanders, right? And Joe Montana and Steve Young and, players from the past, the Jerry Rices of the world and Randy Moss and Terrell Owens. I don't see the debates, well, Terrell Owens would be trash today, or he played against poor competition. Or I don't hear that. The only person I've heard about that recently with is Joe Namath, where there's a few media people out there that state things like Joe Namath, who had more interceptions than touchdowns, I believe, in his career, would be absolutely terrible today. Meanwhile, they don't factor in context of the physical nature of football when Joe Namath played, where the majority of quarterbacks had a bad touchdown to interception ratio, because once again, nobody wants to talk about context in the media, right? They just want to spit out hot takes. But anyway, the point is that the media attacks basketball in a different way. And like I stated, I really do think that it's often used as a cover up for the actual shortcomings of the league, the actual shortcomings of the on-court product. I think that there's a severe, and I'll say this, I don't mind who disagrees with me, I think there's a severe lack of talent and unique talent in the NBA right now. I think that we had way more superstars and stars in several past decades, and I don't think that the league is in great shape right now.
Oh, agreed, 100%. And I do need to correct myself. That was actually ZCB44 in our Discord who posted that. My apologies for the error there. Maz obviously very active in the Discord as well. Great community going on in the Discord. Please follow the link in the description to or on the site to join us on the NLSC Discord. But yeah, that lack of variety, and we see it a lot these days, and it's one of those things, to your point, that's difficult to say without being immediately dismissed as out of touch, old head, whatever, that because we are so algorithm-driven and driven towards trends, I mean, trends have always been a thing, but the algorithm-based trends and all that nonsense, that there is that lack of variety, that lack of individuality. The three-point shooting, for example, because everyone's got to shoot threes because analytics say so. Analytics and algorithms. And we see it affecting video games as well. Got to follow the trends. Got to be Fortnite with basketball. Can't be an authentic NBA sim because that might turn away some of those people who aren't that into that simulation style or even into the NBA, but they do want to play an online game of some kind. But trying to appeal to everybody and trying to cater to these formulas has just really destroyed individuality and uniqueness.
Just some food for thought for the community. If youth hoops is in bad shape, and you admit it's in bad shape, if AAU isn't run properly, if high school hoops isn't what it once was, if college hoops bores you and the product isn't close to what it once was, what do you think that means for the NBA? Right? I think that needs to be noted here. And the other piece too that I want to mention is politics. There's so many politics in the game now, as far as, who comes into the NBA, who's getting minutes, the coaches barely last, right? It's a players league now. So we even had recently Dwayne Casey win coach of the year and then lose his job, right?
Yeah.
He lost his job that next season after winning
crazy.
Coach of the year. Right. So there's players are running the league. There's a lot of politics in the league. Youth hoops is in bad shape. You're not seeing how can you look at something like the 1996 draft class and see all of that talent and all of that variety and just all of those amazing players coming to the NBA, and then look what's happening in the NBA today with the level of talent and the level of people coming in, and how can you say that today's product is unimaginably better, that like everything gets better with time and all the players are better, the sport is better, the players are more skilled? No, go back to the 84 draft class, go back to the 1996 draft class, go back to those and like ask yourself those questions.
Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, nba-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
So, Andrew, we'll throw it over to the community now. So, basketball gamers, I asked for both young and old fans. Classic hoops remains to be a big draw. In fact, we have seen increased interest this year. What is the draw for you, and why are you so into the retro content, mods or otherwise?
Yeah, so let's tip things off with Joshua, a.k.a. Donatello. He was Donatello in the forum, former NLSC forum mod and team member, says, I think for me, it's the arcade gameplay with serious presentation. I like that mix.
Yeah, so I think that video games are often played in the mindset of Zhao Sming, where he wants a hybrid of like Simcade, right? Like he wants some players that he likes in it, and this is kind of how a lot of people are playing basketball video games, but recognizable faces, great talents, the Kobe Bryants of the world, the Michael Jordans, the Shaquille O'Neals, the Allen Iversons, etc. But he wants to use them in a loose atmosphere, and I think that there's a lot of Simcade people out there, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And maybe you play on pro, right, instead of All-Star, Superstar, or Hall of Fame, and maybe that enables you to play a more loose version of basketball, and maybe you get more dunks than you would actually see in real life from these players, and maybe you're going to hit more shots and shoot a higher field goal percentage, and that is perfectly fine. And I think that there's a lot of people that do that, not just with retro content, but with, you know, the current NBA. So if they're playing NBA 2K24, maybe they'll throw it on pro and, you know, jump into a My NBA, and that's their loose experience, and they can throw it down more with Anthony Edwards, right? So, yeah, nothing wrong with Simcade.
Well, two things. You know that I'm very finicky about the term sim and arcade, so that a lot of games that are still sim-based are referred to as arcade, and I disagree with that. But I do know where he's coming from, and it is exactly what you said, that looser approach, and that simplified approach to sim that we used to have in games back in the day. I think with games becoming more realistic, it's something that a lot of us love to see, but others maybe realized that they didn't want as much realism as they perhaps thought, and they did like that looser style. So the older games do definitely cater to that. And you brought up pro difficulty, that second lowest difficulty. It's gone by a couple of different names over the years in different games. One thing that really bugs me is when people say, oh, this is on pro, or what difficulty level are you playing on, as if it matters. Now, if you're bragging about your skill, then yes, what you're doing, whether you're playing against other people or playing on the hardest difficulty, that is a factor. If you can blow out the computer on rookie difficulty or pro difficulty, it's not as an impressive feat. But if it's just about showing off a cool highlight or having fun with games, who cares what difficulty you're playing on? Games are meant to be enjoyed.
Play what suits you and what you have fun with.
Yeah.
And that's what matters. It's one thing if you're lying on social media, stating that you're playing on the hardest level. Also, just to let you know, we can tell when you're not. Just most of the time, you can tell by the way the defense is reacting or the shots that are being made, etc. But if you want to play on rookie or pro, and that's how you have fun, and maybe that's how you have fun competitively as well with, you know, somebody locally or online, then go for it. I mean, that's perfectly fine, and that's up to you, and that's all that matters, is that you're having fun and you're not hurting anybody. So I agree.
That being said, there have been a couple of 2K games where even pro difficulty, the CPU is pretty ruthless. 2K8 is one of them.
Yeah, 2K10 is another.
Yeah.
Actually, 2K10 is brutal on pro.
Next up, we have Thundershack, who is obviously very passionate about classic seasons, says, opportunity to recreate or even rewrite history, especially your favourite teams growing up or in recent history. I can literally hop on 2K20 and play any season I want from 1985 all the way to 2024. Watching classic games on YouTube always makes me want to play them afterwards. Yeah, we can definitely relate to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that my brother Nick and I are doing right now. We're playing NBA 2K19 using the classic seasons mods, and we're doing a 85-86 season. And of course, in that season, the Celtics won the championship. They beat the Rockets in the NBA Finals, but he's using the Bulls for the season, and I'm using the Blazers, and we're going to see if we can rewrite history. And it's fun using those teams and seeing what the records will turn out to be, looking at the stats at the end of the season, etc. So yeah, rewriting history is one of the draws.
Next up, JMO, another modder in our community, of course, says mostly nostalgia, but another big reason is the retro rosters are usually more detailed and accurate compared to the unfinished roster we get by default. And don't forget, you can also play as Shaq and Kobe. Yes, like we said, even something as simple as having all the right accessories, that you kind of like the Leonardo DiCaprio meme where you're pointing at the screen. Look what they did, look what they did. It's really cool, and that's what really draws you into a detailed retro mod.
Yeah, that was the comment that I was referencing at the beginning of the show. Yeah, absolutely. The community does a far better job than the 2K developers who are working on those rosters as far as accuracy goes. And a lot of it doesn't even have to do with the fact that modders can put stuff in the game that 2K can't because of copyright, right? Like, it's the fact that oftentimes modders will actually work on the signatures and make the signatures accurate for that given player. Something as simple as accessories, they'll assign the right accessories to the player. They'll do things like make Michael Finley not like 60 on speed and make him fast like he was in real life and quick like he was in real life. So then you can use Michael Finley on the virtual hardwood more similar to the way he really played in real life. So you could even take out the fact that, you know, modders can get guys like Charles Barkley in the game and make it look just like him, and just say, hey, let's say the modders can't use any stuff that 2K can't put in. Modders will still blow them away as far as accuracy when it comes to signatures, attributes, tendencies, badge assignments, accessories, etc.
And look, I won't say that modders are immune to bias or agendas of their own. That certainly can be an issue, especially when you are new to modding. But you aren't being forced by the NBA. There's no overarching agenda from a bigger entity telling you that you have to make these players better or make these players worse to misrepresent history. And of course, in all fairness, you don't have the time crunch the developers have as well. But to that point, as you've pointed out over the years, Derek, a lot of legacy issues with incorrect ratings. And I've been going back to 2K6, 2K7, 2K8 recently for my own enjoyment and also to write some future Wayback Wednesdays. And the amount of players on the Decade All-Star teams, the All-Decade teams, who can't dunk. Bill Walton, Moses Malone, they've got 60 in dunk, which just doesn't allow them to dunk in those games. That's poor.
That is poor, but I also point something out. You mentioned the time crunch. They're not allowed to use that excuse, Andrew, for inaccuracies.
Multiple years, yeah.
No, they're not. In general, they're not allowed to use time crunch as an issue. This company is absolutely loaded, right?
True.
They make tons of money. They have all the resources they could ever need. It only takes outreach to one or two people to dedicate their time to work on these rosters, and they could have those people working even part-time working on those rosters, and they could make them 10 times better than what 2K puts out. And there's a lot of people in the community that would do it for free. So it's the fact that it has nothing to do with the time crunch, and it has everything to do with it being low priority and politics being involved, right? So we don't allow them to use the time crunch excuse because it doesn't make sense at all. The other point is, I mean, I think that legends and classic players in general have been rushed and made poorly over the years, not just in the NBA 2K series, but also, we talked about it before, in the NBA Live series. Look at some of the ratings to some of the legends who are really great in a game like NBA Live 2004. You got guys that were absolutely awesome in the 60s and 70s overall, and they perform poorly on the court. Akeem Olajuwon, you can't even shoot like a regular jump shot with him in NBA Live 2004. It's like he flicks it every single time because they basically make him a terrible shooter. So, like, EA Sports is not innocent in this manner.
Oh, no.
In fact, their ultimate team ratings in NBA Live 18 and Live 19, but specifically in NBA Live 18, for some of the legends were absolutely unbearably inaccurate and piss poor. So EA Sports and Take-Two both consider the classic content low priority, and it's a damn shame.
I may have been playing devil's advocate there to set you up to disprove that point. Just putting that out there. But did you see that footage of 61-year-old Hakeem Olajuwon moving so smoothly today? And that's 61 years old. So the idea that he was not a great athlete in his prime, yeah, misses with that.
He was training some younger kids on post moves, and his footwork looked absolutely awesome for any age, never mind being a 61-year-old. So yeah, that is super impressive.
And next up we have the Live 01 legends, Nate Starshow and Roger Ward. Nate says, playing with the old school players and rosters and unique game controls. Roger adds, for one, 2K has been on a downslide since 2K18. Ironically, the NBA has been much tougher to watch during the same time span, turning into a three-point shooting contest. Nostalgia is definitely a factor, and I prefer playing PS2 and PS3 hoop games against friends in person. And of course, they play each other frequently. You can see their highlights on their channel, which we definitely recommend you subscribe to, and they're also frequently contributors to the top 10 as well. I agree on all points. Nostalgia is definitely a factor. PS2 and PS3 was kind of that golden age for gaming. It was before microtransactions really took off or were even viable in the PS2 era, obviously. And also unique game controls. Going back to a game and finding something that is really cool that is no longer in games, like the press book. That is not a gameplay mechanic as such, but it is a unique feature.
Yeah, to what Roger said, those PS2 and PS3 hoop titles, they get him, right? Like he's drawn to that era of the NBA, and he's drawn to the mechanics of those games and probably the presentation as well. And in relation to what Nate said, yeah, I mean, if you look at today's NBA 2K games, they oftentimes overcomplicate the dribble moves, right? and the different moves you can execute. And there's a lot of suction in these games that prevent you from executing these moves realistically, as the player would execute them in real life. And there's a lot of skating, right? And there's a lot of ball warping hand to hands, which makes it look pretty ridiculous as well. So there's advantages to the mechanics in some of the older games. Even on a game like NBA 2K10, which we just played, having the crossover button, the spin move button, and tapping the bumper to, do standing dribble size ups, etc. Like that could be a lot more fun for the Nathan Rogers of the world and a lot of people who do not like the mechanics in the newest NBA 2K. So I see where they're coming from.
I don't think there are two other people in the world who have mastered the mechanics of Live 2001 like those legends.
Yeah, they're amazing at it. And I had a blast playing co-op with Nate on it, and I got to connect with him again.
Next up is Oldhead, contributed to the top 10 as well. Says, I've been getting every 2K since Dreamcast and prior was hooping live and shootout and everything else. I'm a real hooper. The classic hoops for me is something I do every year once I get tired of online MyPlayer mode with friends. This year I think is different. I'm 38 now. I think I'm just not enjoying the online aspect anymore. It's not basketball. It's glitches, game mechanics abuse, etc. And to quote-unquote compete, you got to join them, which I don't do, so I end with a 45% to 60% win rate every year. I don't even care about losing. I love losing. I tweak my offline sliders so hard until I'm losing when I should. I'm 6-8 on my season right now. The 2K online community is beyond toxic, everyone knows it, and everyone still stays toxic. They got full squads, jumping into rec, playing against dads like me who get 1 to 2 hours a night, max boosting on us. Matchmaking sucks, everyone uses the same jumpers, the same copy-paste animations, etc. I could go on for days. I think I'm finally offline only from here on out, and with offline I don't even play new rosters. Maybe this is my last 2K purchase. Maybe not, I'll probably be back in the rec come 2K25, but my fuse is super short. I'm happier now, I'm playing less, and when I do play, I'm playing how I want. Win, win, win. I don't know if I can put it any better than that. That is exactly everything that is wrong with the online scene, that focus on the metagaming, the lack of matchmaking, the toxicity, that there's no fun competition, no real competitive spirit, people quitting when you're in the wreck and you're down 4-0 in the first minute and they quit because, we're not going to win this game. Where's that competitive spirit? It's just complete garbage now. So I get everything that he's coming from. That sounds like me, Derek, with my being burned out on online MyPlayer, which is a shame because I did have a lot of fun with the guys back in the day, the peak of 2K Pro-Am, 2K16 and 2K17, and being punished for using real basketball strategies. I can absolutely relate to that. You very wisely have avoided the online scene for years, and I just applaud what he's written there because it is absolutely spot on.
Yeah, I was about to say, that sounds like you.
Yeah.
Minus the him being a dad piece that, pretty much everything he said is, what was dragging you down.
Yeah, and a young man of 38, not turning 40 this year. That's
right, exactly. Right, exactly.
Young fella.
But also the playing what he wants right now and spending his time wisely with basketball video games, which I think you're doing a much better job of. And not to pat myself on the back, but I'll take a little credit for that.
You can take a lot of credit.
Because I think I dragged you away from that toxic environment and how you were kind of feeling about, the newest NBA 2Ks in that online scene. And, we kind of regrew your passion for these classic games and also the classic mods and whatnot. I want to point out that one of the best things that he said is that he loves losing. I know that sounds weird, but basically what he's trying to say is if you're winning every game, it's boring. If it's too easy, it's boring. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that can resonate with the love losing statement because it can be a lot more interesting to be 6-8 or 8-6 than to be 14-0. And if you're playing in a My NBA or if you're on PC, you're playing in a My League, etc., and you want that to be interesting and you want it to be more sim, you got to lose some games, right? So no, I love his mindset about gaming in general.
Yeah, I've definitely developed that love of retro gaming that was always there, but had kind of been pushed aside by the need to get on the grind each and every year. And I absolutely give you a lot of credit for that, actually. And also to be open-minded about other games and to revisit other games apart from Live back in the day. And to the point about losing, one of my all-time favorite basketball gaming experiences is my Live 06 dynasty, my NBA Live 06 PC dynasty with the Bulls. That first year when Ben Gordon missed 20 games with a broken wrist, went 47-35 playing every game, had quite a few tough losses playing on the harder difficulty level in that game, and with that underdog Bulls team that was even more shorthanded with Gordon on the sideline. And that was a blast because it really felt like an adventure, and I felt challenged.
Yeah, exactly. And I think some of our favorite connections is when we were playing against each other and it was heated, right? It was great competition. And like my Michael Finley full court game winner
I was going to say
against you on NBA Live 10. And I also had a game winner with Hashim Thabit against you, and also a pull-up game winner with Kevin Durant. I've actually had many game winners on you, Andrew. How about that?
Yeah. I've had one or two, I think.
Yeah, and you've had a couple on me as well. But we've had so many close games, and it's always the battles that you remember. It's never the blowouts, right? So, and that's why a lot of people said that this year's NBA Finals was also so boring. The ratings were down across the board. There was a lot of negative commentary about these NBA Finals, is because like every single game was a blowout, basically, for the series. So yeah, people want to see competition. People want to see, whether it be in a video game, if they're watching like the 2K League, or they're watching real life basketball, the competition aspect is what's so exciting. Nobody wants to see teams getting blown out all the time.
And a couple more from X before we jump over to the NLSC Discord. DC says retro is full of nostalgia, takes you back, not just about the game, life, the music, the culture. And it absolutely does take you back to a time in your life that you're nostalgic for many reasons. I've talked about Live 2002 being special to me because it was the game I was playing my last year of high school. And culture is a great word for that as well. That music of the time and the presentation and, of course, the players. It's just that whole package.
Yeah, it's also brings you back to shared experiences with people that you love or really like friends and family, right? And stuff like that. And those are experiences that you often cherish the most. And yeah, I've talked about it before. I have a Spotify playlist for basketball video games, and it's loaded with NBA Live and NBA 2K soundtrack songs, a couple from NBA Shootout, etc. So yeah, I think that the soundtracks definitely add to the nostalgia.
Gameface Inc. says, like you guys talk about on the NLSC, Game Almanacs. I love that phrase is catching on, interactive almanacs, which I do believe that video games act as, classic video games act as. And obviously mods add another layer to that, but even just dusting off an old favourite with the default rosters, taking you back to that season, to that time, to DC's point, to the culture of the time. Going back and playing some 24/7 mode in NBA 2K7 recently, Derek, and just the fashions in those cutscenes and the slang of the time really takes you back to the mid-2000s. So, yeah, they are interactive almanacs.
Yeah, go back and play a game like Tecmo Super NBA Basketball and tell me that it's not awesome to look at all the different team logos in the team selection screen, right? To see those digitized player portraits and whatnot. And then you have other video games that just have excellent presentation elements that really take you back. But yeah, I mean, just the rosters themselves with names that you remember. And oftentimes the biggest nostalgia is surrounding not the stars, right? Sometimes it's players that are on the bench. It's players that are not as well known today. I've talked about it before with my Celtics teams, looking on the bench and seeing somebody like Andrew DeClercq on the Celtics, and looking maybe at like a late 90s Celtics roster and seeing the brief stint from Alton Lister on that team. Like stuff like that just really brings you back.
At some point we need to do a bonus podcast where we just see if we can recall the most obscure players from the 90s. Might be a 5-hour show though.
Yeah. Dwayne Chincius had a brief stint with the Boston Celtics, and it was only for a few games in one season. But if you remember, he had that bleach blonde hair.
Yes.
So that it's stints like that and players like that definitely bring back a lot of memories for me.
Chincius and Eric Washington traded for each other in 99, ending up with phantom stints in Live 2000 as a result. A little bit of trivia there. And jumping over to the NLC Discord for a couple more responses now. QB1120 says, well, there's only one option for sim basketball these days, and I don't like 2K, so it's fun to go back and play the older games that I actually had fun playing. Makes me nostalgic for good games, and wish that new games were made like the old ones. Goes back to what we said. Those games had heart, soul, and character. They were made for enthusiastic basketball fans and basketball gamers, and if you are not enjoying the current games, as I don't, then go back to something you like.
Yeah, we need competition in the space, and that's something that he's also referencing there. But yeah, also those games that he's playing, he probably enjoyed the NBA more at the time as well. So that also factors in.
Layla mentions the preservation of mods and also 2K11 being updated in 2024. That is very cool to see. I obviously had those attempts to update 2K11 for a few years there, Derek. Really fell apart in 2020. I had a great opportunity with the shutdown to catch up on that. But as you pointed out back then, it fell through because I just wasn't passionate about the current NBA. You need to be passionate about the roster project you're working on.
Yeah, I think that the majority of roster mods that do not get a full release and do not get completed or for that reason. I think that there wasn't enough passion behind the project, right? I think it's rarely because somebody ran out of time. It's more that they didn't want to make that mod a priority anymore or lost interest, kind of like you did. And it's not that you didn't have fun doing some of the art and the ratings and, seeing things come together, but you were not passionate about the 2020 NBA. Yeah. Right. But if this was a mod that you were working on for, say, 96, 97 or 97, 98, you probably would have finished that mod and it would have been released and it would have looked awesome. So, yeah, if you're going to work on a big project, make sure you're super into that content.
Yeah, you'll make time if you want to finish it, basically.
Exactly.
And finally, we have ZCB44 says, for me personally, it all links back to playing NBA Street Volume 2 when I was only a few years old around its release. That game was my initial education on the stars that had come before my time, with all the legends and their signature moves. Ever since then, retro representation in video games has been important to me, whether that be with retro teams or even just retro uniforms. Also, being able to play with retro rosters in HD is just straight up great. And that's a great example of basketball games being an educational tool for the history of the game, why it is so important to have accurate legends in the game. And to his point, even just being able to select retro jerseys for throwback nights, that was really cool.
Yeah, in relation to how the player performs in a retro mod, it can absolutely impact the way a young person who didn't see that person live or when they were playing or hasn't watched highlights and whatnot can definitely affect how they perceive that player. For example, if a young kid who never saw early 2000s Dirk Nowitzki put the 0102 Mavericks on the floor in NBA 2K24, where he's a 25 on speed and like 26 on speed with the ball or something, he would automatically come away with the assumption that Take Two must know what they're doing because they're putting this classic team in the game, and that Dirk was deathly slow, right? And that he couldn't handle the ball and that he wasn't quick, etc. in the early 2000s. So it can absolutely form opinions on these players and give the false impression, which is why I've said on many NLSC podcasts in the past that what they do in relation to representing these players is completely disrespectful. And I think you would agree. They're disrespecting those players, they're disrespecting those teams, and they're giving the gamer base the wrong impression of these players, like how they played on an actual basketball court, their skill sets, their abilities, etc. So definitely agree there. And I think that one of the big draws right now to the NBA 2K19 85-86 roster that I'm working on is the fact that, he mentioned the point of seeing it in HD. I mean, having a completely accurate 85-86 season with PS4 graphics in full high definition with some of the amazing animations that are in that game, etc., and my own slider tweaks. I mean, the way that looks, it's very close to real life to me. And, we weren't able to experience that back then, right, with video games. So the fact that I can play this 85-86 season with all of this accuracy and players playing to their strengths, etc., in high definition looking this awesome, you can't beat that.
And of course, when it's so accurate, so detailed that you forget that it's a mod, that it just looks like a game set in 1986, but with, as you say, PS4 graphics and mechanics, it's just awesome.
Exactly.
But thank you to everybody who responded to Derek's prompt. As always, we love to hear from the community about these topics. And Derek, we are big advocates for retro gaming and also appreciation of NBA history, so it is very heartwarming to see other people share this love and appreciation that we have.
I love this. Great responses. No quick responses either, really, just like people thinking about the question in depth and, sharing with us their thoughts and reasons on all of these different mailbag topics. So I really appreciate the interaction. And again, you help Andrew and I stay motivated doing the show. I think we love doing it anyway, Andrew. We'd be putting it together more than likely every single week. So we appreciate you.
Love the feedback, love the discussion. Please keep it coming. With that being said, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. As always, we thank you for tuning in and invite you to join us again next week and every week, either on the NLSC, nb-live.com, our YouTube channel, or your podcast app of choice. In the meantime, please connect with us on social media, so we can get in touch with us, and of course, stay up to date with all of our content. So Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
You can reach me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at D43G and at D4384. I'm also on the NLSC, D43, and on YouTube, D43.
As for me, I'm Andrew in the forum, and Andrew NLSC on X. The NLSC is on X and Facebook, at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube, at NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, nb-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.